Everyone suffers and struggles and goes through storms. This is just a simple part of life. There's no way around these challenges. But the thing is, what do you do in those struggles? How do you handle these situations? What do you do in the storm? Do you worship? Do you fold? Do you give up? Do you point fingers? Do you blame? A lot of people don't understand what a blessing it is to suffer sometimes. And I know this sounds crazy. Suffering, how can that be a blessing? But it's what happens in the suffering, the person that you become through the suffering, that is the true blessing. Not only do you get a chance to lean on the Lord for your strength, you come out of it a stronger person than what you went into the storm as. We see that with people in the Bible. Job lost everything when Satan tested him and tempted him and tried to get him to turn his back on God. We see he lost all of his children. He lost all of his wealth. Even his wife was telling him to curse God and die. And he didn't. We see this with Paul. Paul suffered greatly for the kingdom of heaven. He went from being a persecutor of the church to writing a large portion of the New Testament scriptures, suffering for Jesus Christ all along the way. And as we suffer, or as we're tested through the trials and the fire that we go through, there's one thing that we always must do, and that's focus on the Lord. Focus on Jesus. Go to the Father in prayer. Remember Bible verses. There's some Bible verses here that I want to share just from a simple Google search. If you have more biblical knowledge and you don't need tools like this, you can just flip open to your favorite book in the Bible that gives you encouragement during this type of season. But I do want to share some Bible verses for those that are maybe new in the faith or just don't even simply know how to search for resources like this when they're going through a struggle. I simply just typed in Bible verses about suffering, because there's never a time in life that you're not suffering in some degree. It may be small, it may be minute, sometimes it may be great. Even in my life right now where things are great, I'm suffering in small ways of just the transition from being a self-employed person to going to the job field. Just the transition and all that. I felt uncertain being self-employed because the market just wasn't as lucrative as it once was. So now I have to go back to a job field. I'm walking into this job field of men that don't believe in Jesus like I do. And I have to be a beacon. I have to be a light. I have to be a light in the darkness for these men that listen to worldly music, smoke cigarettes and do dip, and they cuss like sailors. I also, in this aspect, have to count on work to always be there for me. But what I do know is that God is my provider. He is a way maker, and all things do work together for the good of those who love him. Let me read you some of these Bible verses though. 1 Peter 3:14, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. If you're going through a struggle and you are fixing your eyes on the Lord, you will be fine. It may not work out the way that you think it will, but trust and believe that God does work all things out for the good of those who love him. So if you're going through a loss, or if you're going through a breakup, or if you're in a situation like I am where you're in a new line of work, God will show you favor. His favor rests upon the lowly. Don't get discouraged. Don't think that this is the end for you. Or just be happy that you have a new beginning. They just put a bookstore in my town called The Next Chapter. And as I'm getting ready to go into a season of being a married man this coming week, as well as in a new job, as well as my wife moving in with me, this is a new chapter in my life. The next chapter. And it's great how God gives you those signs where he gives you that comfort just to let you know, hey, I see you and I'm with you in this struggle, in this suffering, in this new age of fear that you may have from the enemy, thinking that things aren't going to go the way that you expect them to. Your Father is here with you. We have 1 Peter 5:10. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. What are you trying to hold on to? What is it that you're trying to control? Are you anxious? Do you have worry? Are you stressing over this? Do you know how to let go? I know there's a cliche saying, let go and let God, but are you practicing that? Are you walking it out? Or are you bringing these cares to the Lord in prayer and then taking them back with you when you walk away from your prayer time? Don't do that. Take those cares, cast them on him. Leave them there though. Don't take them back with you, because when you do that, you're letting God know, I don't trust you, even though I'm bringing this to you. As mere mortals, humans, we tend to want to control things that we have no control over anyway. So why are we trying to hang on to things like this? These things that stress us out. We're never supposed to be stressing over these things. We put a lot on our plate that God has never even called us to deal with. So instead of trying to force things to work like I was doing with my self-employed business, instead of trying to force that to work, I just let go of it. I have a stronger sense of peace now than I did when I was trying to make it work. But sometimes when it's time for a new season, the Lord will make you uncomfortable in the place that you're currently at. Because if you stay complacent, if you stay comfortable, you might not do or make the change that's required of you to step into that new season, into the blessing that the Lord has for you. Don't always be romantic to things that aren't working. Give it up, let it go, let go and let God, and let Jesus be the peace that you need in this season in your life. 2 Corinthians 4:15. All this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. We all have gone through a season where we've wanted breakthrough. Have you received that breakthrough? And if so, are you giving God the glory? Are you giving him honor? Are you giving him praise and worship? Do so. Let this be an example. Let this be a light to those that are still struggling. People need to see this. They need to hear testimonies. They need to understand that, all right, God's done it for them. He can do it for me. And that's what the beautiful part of the Bible is, because we see time after time after time where God has just remained faithful, and he's delivered the people of Israel, and he's delivered the disciples, and he's done all these amazing things where we can see and know that just because he's done it for them doesn't mean he won't do it for me too. Have you guys heard the Brandon Lake song, The Same God? We serve the same God that's done all these amazing miracles in the past, and God has not stopped moving. He does not stop working. He doesn't stop doing miracles, guys. I promise you. But if he does do a miracle in your life, give him the honor, give him the glory, shout it from the rooftops. Let everyone know that you serve a mighty and alive, awesome God. I want you to take a look at this list real quick of just men who've suffered in the Bible that God still used greatly. We see Jeremiah, number one, is a prophet who suffered and had doubts about God's management of the world. He represents those who suffer violence for honorable deeds. Sounds like a lot of Christians that we hear about in third world countries. What about the 70 Christians that got beheaded in Africa? Have you heard about that? What about Jonah, a servant of God who struggled after disobeying God's command? We know that he was supposed to go to Nineveh and tell them to repent, but he didn't want to because they were a vile people group. And he got trapped in the belly of the fish for 3 days. And then afterwards, he went and he did what God wanted him to do. Maybe you find yourself in a position or a place where God's giving you an instruction and you don't want to do it. Maybe that's why you're suffering. If you lean into what God wants you to do, maybe you'll see that breakthrough that you've been looking for. We see Noah. Noah looked like a fool telling people it's going to rain. I'm building this boat when it had never rained before. He suffered persecution and ridicule and laughter and mocking. And then when it all came down to it, he was right. And we know the story of Noah and the flood. He's the one that survived with his family. Paul, as I mentioned in the beginning, a man who suffered much for the sake of the gospel, sometimes despaired of life itself. Paul did die for the faith. But all the while he was locked up in and out of prison for sharing the gospel, for people trying to stop his ministry of him spreading the truth about the gospel of Jesus Christ. A persecutor to one who brought the faith and professed the gospel boldly with much faith, died for the faith. And then we see Adam, a man who was liable to suffering. He was the first one to sin. Him and Eve are where we get our sin nature from in the first place. So all the suffering that we endure comes from him. I'm going to finish this off with Judas, a flawed human being who was used by God through grace. He had a problem with being a thief and ended in suicide. We all know the story of Judas. How do you walk with Jesus for 3 years, and then when it comes down to the time to betray him, you did it for 30 pieces of silver? All along, you were stealing out of the money bag. You were never a man of God if this is how you live your life. Jesus does all these miraculous things. You see all these signs and wonders. You see all the great things he did for many people, and your heart was so hard that you betrayed him in the end. This happens with a lot of people that deconstruct their faith. Don't serve the Lord. Don't profess Jesus openly and then just turn your back on him and walk away because Christianity doesn't suit you anymore, and living your life for Jesus isn't as rewarding as you thought it would be. We should be willing to die for this faith. But I'm willing to bet that a lot of people won't make it through the suffering, through the struggle, through the trials and tribulations, and they'll just tap out and go find an easier way to cope. Don't let that be you. If you're struggling, if you're suffering, the devil doesn't want you to hear this message. He wants you to stay depressed. He wants you to stay anxious. He wants you to stress out and be worried about things that you have no control over in the first place. He does not want you to lean on Jesus. He doesn't want you to give all your cares to the Lord. He wants you to suffer. And that's what his main goal is. You see what he did to Job, and it didn't work for him. Is it going to work on you? That's the question. That's going to do it for this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, God bless.